Imagine walking into a restaurant expecting a warm meal and a great evening, only to face blatant disrespect from a waitress who thinks you don't belong. But what happens when she turns around and sees the owner standing there, ready to deliver a single line that changes everything? Watch this gripping story of accountability and justice unfold. Margaret Thompson entered the restaurant, her heels tapping lightly on the glossy hardwood floor. The elegant dining venue hummed with refined charm, dim lighting, the clink of glasses, and soft chatter merging into a calming ambiance. She couldn't resist a smile, absorbing the sophisticated setting. This was her son James's triumph, the result of years of dedication and effort. That evening, Margaret was there to honor both her own achievement and her son's success. James had urged her to come for dinner, promising to join her for dessert after overseeing the kitchen and operations. In his modest way, he seldom revealed he owned the place, preferring to watch the restaurant's rhythm discreetly. Margaret respected that quality in him. "A table for one," the hostess inquired, her smile courteous and inviting. "Yes, but I'll have company later," Margaret answered. "I'll begin alone. This way, please." The hostess guided her to a table by the window, where city lights enhanced the restaurant's allure. Margaret settled in, adjusting her navy blue dress while scanning the menu. Pride swelled within her, picturing James ensuring perfection behind the scenes. Soon, a waitress approached, in her mid-30s, with a stern look and rigid stance. She lacked the warmth of the other staff. "Water?" she asked brusquely, avoiding eye contact. "Yes, please," Margaret replied, offering a kind smile. The waitress returned, placing the glass down heavily. Margaret paused, unsettled by the curtness, but hesitant to judge too quickly. "Thank you," she said graciously. The waitress ignored her, pulling out a notepad instead. "Ready to order?" Margaret nodded. "I'll have the house salad to start, followed by the grilled salmon." The waitress jotted the order and walked off silently. Margaret frowned, noticing her warm greeting to another table with smiles and lively talk. Shaking her head, Margaret pushed the moment aside, reminding herself she was there to celebrate. Yet, a subtle unease lingered. She sipped her water, her excitement slightly dulled. Margaret sat at her table, her fingers gently tapping her water glass's rim. Nearly 20 minutes had passed since her salad was cleared, with no sign of her main course. She checked the time on her phone, a slight frown forming. Her patience was wearing thin. Scanning the dining area, Margaret noticed the smooth flow of service. A young couple nearby, seated well after her, was already enjoying their meals, served with flair by a cheerful waiter who chatted briefly and refilled their drinks. Margaret's chest tightened at the disparity. She looked toward the kitchen, hoping to see Sarah, the waitress, with her plate. Instead, Sarah leaned casually against a counter near another table, laughing with diners. Her relaxed demeanor suggested no urgency to tend to Margaret's table. After a few more minutes, Margaret raised her hand to get Sarah's attention. Sarah hesitated, rolling her eyes before approaching with a forced smile. "Yes?" she asked sharply. Margaret kept her tone polite but firm. "My entree's been delayed quite a while. Could you check on it, please?" Sarah shrugged, her face indifferent. "The kitchen's swamped. It'll come when it's ready." Margaret tilted her head, her patience fraying but her composure steady. "I understand a busy kitchen, but tables seated after me are already eating." Sarah's lips curled into a faint smirk. "Maybe they didn't pick something tricky like salmon. That takes time, you know." Margaret held her gaze. "I'm pretty sure salmon doesn't need 30 minutes. I'd appreciate a direct follow-up." Sarah sighed loudly, her annoyance clear. "Fine, I'll check." She turned abruptly and strode off, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. Margaret watched her head to the kitchen, her frustration growing. The exchange soured her evening's joy. At another table, a server brought warm bread, chatting warmly as diners thanked her. The contrast stung more than Margaret cared to admit. Several minutes later, Sarah returned, still empty-handed. Her irritated expression implied Margaret's request was a burden. "Well?" Margaret asked calmly. Sarah crossed her arms. "Your food's not ready yet," she said, sarcasm dripping. "Like I said, salmon takes time." Margaret leaned forward, her voice steady but firm. "And as I said, others who ordered after me are served. Can you explain why?" Sarah blinked, her smirk wavering briefly before she regained it. "Maybe they didn't sit there picking at every detail," she snapped. "I'm doing my job." Margaret took a deep breath, her stomach nodding. "Your job includes treating all customers equally," she said. "If my order's delayed, I'd like clarity, not excuses." Sarah's eyes narrowed, and she gave a harsh laugh. "I'll tell the kitchen you're upset, but that won't make it faster. Maybe just chill." Margaret stared at her, choosing her words carefully. "Your tone and attitude reflect poorly on this place," she said evenly. "I'm here to enjoy my night, not argue over basic service." Sarah's cheeks reddened, but she pressed on. "I'll check again," she said curtly before storming off. Watching Sarah retreat, Margaret felt an unexpected anger rise. This wasn't mere poor service, it was intentional and disrespectful. She glanced around, seeing other diners receive attentive care Sarah withheld from her. Margaret took a deep breath, recalling why she was there. This restaurant was her son's dream, a testament to his hard work. Yet the disrespect she faced was hard to ignore. Across the room, she glimpsed James emerging from the kitchen, his sharp eyes scanning the dining area. Margaret didn't signal him. She wanted to handle this herself for now, but hoped he'd notice the tension at her table. Margaret shifted in her seat, her patience nearly gone. Her half-empty water glass was lukewarm, and her stomach churned with hunger and irritation. An hour had passed since her order, and Sarah's service remained subpar. Other tables enjoyed warm interactions with attentive servers, making Margaret's table a stark exception. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, moving slowly as she served another table. Margaret raised her hand, resolved to confront the issue. Sarah hesitated, clearly reluctant, before approaching with a huff. "What now?" she asked, arms crossed, her tone sharp with impatience. Margaret sat up straight, meeting her gaze. "I'd like to know why my entree's taken an hour when later, arrivals are already served." Sarah laughed sharply, drawing nearby glances. "Maybe they don't fuss over every little thing." Margaret stayed calm, though her chest tightened. "Requesting basic service isn't fussing." Sarah's eyes narrowed, her smirk returning. "You people always think the world owes you something." Margaret froze briefly, her composure nearly breaking. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Sarah said, her voice low and sly. "Some of us earn what we have. Others just expect handouts." Margaret's cheeks warmed, but she refused to show weakness. "I'm here for a meal, not judgment from someone failing at her job." Sarah scoffed. "Sure, because I'm the reason you're unhappy with everything." Margaret inhaled deeply, holding her calm. "I'd like to speak to the manager." Sarah's laugh was mocking. "Of course, you'd make this a big deal. I've seen it. People like you, always quick to cry for help when things don't go your way." Margaret's jaw tightened. "What do you mean by people like me?" Sarah tilted her head, her smirk widening. "You know what I mean. Always whining, always playing the victim. If you don't like it here, maybe find a place more your speed." Margaret gripped her napkin tightly. "My speed," she repeated, her voice low. "Do you treat all customers this way, or just those you think don't belong?" Sarah shrugged. "I treat everyone the same. Maybe you're just too sensitive." The words lingered, sharp and intentional. Nearby diners turned, sensing the tension. Margaret felt their stares, but stood firm. "Let me be clear," Margaret said, her tone icy but controlled. "Your behavior is unprofessional, disrespectful, and discriminatory. It won't be ignored." Sarah rolled her eyes. "Oh, spare me. I didn't do anything wrong. You're just making a mountain out of a molehill." Margaret leaned forward, her voice firm but not loud. "I've been patient, but you've insulted me, delayed my service, and treated me like I don't belong. If you think I'll accept that, you're wrong." Sarah's confidence wavered as the room quieted, but she doubled down. "Sure, paint me as the villain. That's what you people do best, right? Blame everyone else." Before Margaret could reply, a sharp voice cut in behind Sarah. "What's happening here?" Margaret looked up, her heart lifting as she saw James a few feet away. His piercing gaze locked on Sarah, his face calm but intense. His presence drew immediate attention, shifting the room's tension. Sarah turned, her face paling. Nothing," she stammered. "Just a mix-up." James glanced at Margaret, who gave a calm, pointed look, then back to Sarah. "I want to hear it from the customer," he said firmly. Margaret eased back, feeling a slight relief. "It seems the waitress forgot my order, then made it personal to cover her mistake," she said evenly. James's jaw clenched, and he turned to Sarah, who looked uneasy. "We'll discuss this in my office. Now." He gestured firmly for Sarah to follow, his tone leaving no room for argument. Margaret followed quietly, her calm contrasting Sarah's tense, defensive posture. James closed the office door and leaned against his desk, arms crossed, his gaze fixed on Sarah. "Explain yourself," James said, his voice quiet but authoritative. "What happened out there?" Sarah crossed her arms, glancing at Margaret before facing James. "It's just a misunderstanding," she said tersely. "She got upset over a delayed order. I explained, but she kept pushing, and it got heated." Margaret tilted her head, her tone measured. "Pushing? Asking about an unsubmitted order is just expecting accountability." Sarah rolled her eyes, smirking. "See? She's impossible to satisfy. I forgot the order. It happens." But she made a scene instead of being reasonable. James's voice was sharp. "A scene? You mean asking for the service she deserved?" Sarah straightened, her cheeks flushing. "I said it was a mistake. People forget. I didn't do it on purpose." Margaret cut through Sarah's excuses calmly. "But you didn't stop there. You mocked me, made snide remarks, and judged me instead of fixing your error." Sarah turned to Margaret, defensive. "I wasn't judging you. You acted like everything was my fault, like I ruined your night on purpose." Margaret leaned forward, her gaze steady. "If forgetting the order was a mistake, your comments about people like me weren't." Sarah's face flushed, her confidence faltering. "I didn't mean it like that." James's eyes narrowed. "Then what did you mean?" Sarah hesitated, her bravado fading. "I don't know. It slipped out." She kept pressing, and I said something dumb. It wasn't about her specifically. Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Not about me specifically? Then why say, people like me always complain or don't belong here?" Sarah's jaw tightened, glaring at Margaret. "You're twisting my words." James's voice grew cold. "No one's twisting anything. I heard you. You didn't just forget her order. You treated her like she wasn't worth your time and justified it with remarks that don't belong here." Sarah flinched but held her ground. "Come on. You've worked restaurants. You know how some customers are, always finding something to complain about." Margaret's tone sharpened. "So it's my fault you disrespected me?" Sarah's eyes darted between them, her frustration spilling out. "I didn't disrespect you. You took everything wrong. Why is this such a big deal?" James leaned forward, his voice firm. It's a big deal because you insulted her deliberately. You didn't just mess up. You made it personal. Sarah scoffed, her tone bitter. So I'm the bad guy for not catering to someone looking for trouble? Margaret stood, her presence commanding. I wasn't looking for trouble. I came to celebrate at my son's restaurant. I didn't expect to be treated like I didn't belong. Sarah's face paled. Wait, your son? James stood tall, his expression icy. Yes, my mother. Sarah's mouth opened and closed, her confidence shattered. I didn't know. If I'd known, it shouldn't matter, James cut in, his voice rising slightly. Mother, regular customer or first-timer, everyone deserves respect. You've shown you don't value that. Sarah stammered, her defenses crumbling. I wasn't thinking. Margaret raised a hand, silencing her. It's not about not thinking. You assumed you could treat me however you wanted without consequences. Sarah clenched her fists, her voice desperate. I've worked here for years, harder than most. You're throwing me under the bus for one bad night? James's tone stayed cold. This isn't about one night. I've had complaints about your attitude before, but I gave you chances. That was my mistake. Sarah's voice rose, her frustration peaking. This is absurd. You're overreacting because she's your mom. James stepped forward, his gaze unyielding. It's not about her being my mother. It's about your blatant disrespect and refusal to own it. Sarah opened her mouth to argue, but James stopped her. Enough. Take a break. We're not done. Sarah huffed, her face red with anger, and stormed out, slamming the door. James sighed heavily, turning to Margaret. I'm sorry, he said softly, frustration in his voice. She's way out of line, and I'll handle it. Margaret gave a small smile. I trust you will, but this is bigger than me. It's about the culture you're building. James nodded grimly. And that culture doesn't include her. As the door's slam faded, James stood still, arms crossed tightly. Margaret sat calmly, contrasting his tension. She watched him, sensing his frustration's weight. I'm sorry you went through that, James said, his voice low with anger. She had no right to speak to anyone like that, especially here. Margaret leaned forward, her tone steady. I know you're upset, and you should be. But what's your next step? James exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I'm firing her. No question. After what I heard, she's gone. Margaret nodded thoughtfully. That's the right call. But will she leave understanding why? James frowned, leaning against his desk. That's what bothers me. If I fire her now, she'll think I'm overreacting because it's personal. She'll blame us and play the victim. Margaret tilted her head. So, what's the alternative? James straightened, his face resolute. I want her to face her actions first. She needs to know why they're unacceptable. Not just to me, but to everyone. She'll leave knowing the harm she caused. Margaret smiled slightly. You want to teach her a lesson? James nodded firmly. Exactly. I'll call a staff meeting after the rush. We'll discuss tonight. Her behavior, her words, all of it. She'll hear from me, maybe her co-workers, why this isn't okay. Margaret raised an eyebrow. That could get messy. Are you ready for the consequences? James met her gaze, his voice steady. Yes. If anyone objects to me addressing this behavior, they don't belong here. I'd rather lose staff than let this place turn toxic. Margaret leaned back approvingly. It's bold, but you can handle it. James gave a wry chuckle. You always said I was stubborn. Guess it's paying off. Margaret smiled but grew serious. Be clear with your message, James. This isn't just about firing her. It's about showing everyone this behavior isn't tolerated, no matter who it targets. James nodded. That's my plan. It's not about you being my mom. It's about the restaurant I want to run. Everyone needs to see consequences for this behavior. Margaret leaned forward, deliberate. And her? Can she grasp the impact of her actions? James's jaw tightened. I'm not sure, but she'll hear it anyway. She won't leave thinking this is personal. She needs to know her words hurt people. Margaret nodded slowly. Then make her see it. Call out her behavior, show her the damage, not just to me, but to this restaurant's values. James's eyes softened, looking at his mother. You've taught me a lot about doing what's right. I hope I'm living up to it. Margaret touched his arm. You are, James. And this is another step to ensure this place reflects your hard work. James smiled faintly, determination in his eyes. I'll make it happen. She'll face the truth before she leaves. Margaret stood, smoothing her dress. Good. And remind everyone why this restaurant stands out. Show it's not just about me, it's about setting a standard. James nodded, his resolve firm. I'll hold the meeting after the rush. She'll face everyone, then she's out. Margaret smiled proudly. That's leadership, with accountability and clarity. James exhaled, relaxing slightly. Now, let's get you some food. It's been a long night, and I owe you dinner. Margaret laughed softly, easing the tension. I'll hold you to it, but I'm still watching you. James laughed genuinely. I'd expect nothing less. The restaurant had calmed as the dinner rush ended. James stood at the dining room's front, his staff gathered before him. Margaret sat aside, a calm observer. Tension and curiosity filled the air. Word had spread of something big. Sarah stood among the staff, arms crossed tightly, eyes darting nervously, bracing for what was coming. James cleared his throat, commanding attention. Thanks for staying late, he began firmly. I need to address something critical from tonight's service. Something against everything this restaurant represents, the staff murmured, glancing at each other. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she stayed silent. James continued. This place was built on respect for everyone. First-time diners, regulars, CEOs, or dishwashers. Everyone should feel welcome, and when that fails, we fail, as a team. Margaret watched the words resonate. Some staff nodded, others shifted uneasily. Sarah's face hardened, her lips a thin line. James's gaze landed on Sarah. Tonight, a customer was treated unacceptably, ignored, disrespected, and spoken to in a way that doesn't belong here or anywhere. Sarah stepped forward, defensive. I didn't mean it that way. I was stressed and... James raised a hand. Not yet. You'll get your turn. He addressed the staff. This isn't about one mistake. Mistakes happen. But how you handle them matters. Responsibility matters. Dignity matters. He paused, letting the words settle. Tonight wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice to treat someone differently based on assumptions and biases that have no place here. Sarah shifted, arms tightening. I said I was sorry, she muttered. What more do you want? Margaret spoke up, her voice calm but commanding. An apology is empty without accountability. All eyes turned to her as she stood. You can't dismiss this as stress. You made me feel unwelcome, like I didn't belong. And if you can't admit that, your apology means nothing. Sarah's face flushed, and she looked away. I didn't mean it like that, she muttered. James stepped forward, firm but fair. Then what did you mean, Sarah? It looked like you made assumptions that hurt someone. Sarah faltered, her defensiveness fading under her co-worker's stares. I didn't think it was a big deal. I just assumed. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Assumed I didn't matter. Sarah's head snapped up, pale. No, I didn't mean that. But your actions said it, Margaret cut in sharply. You treated me like I didn't matter. That's the issue. James nodded, unyielding. That's why you can't stay, Sarah. I've given you chances before, but this isn't about me or my mother. It's about this restaurant's values, which you don't share. Sarah's face crumpled, her voice desperate. "You're firing me over this." James softened slightly but stayed firm. "I'm letting you go because your attitude's been an issue before. Tonight was the final straw. I can't have someone who disrespects our guests or team." Sarah looked for support, but the silence was heavy. She faced James, trembling. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "And yet it did," James said simply. "Now it's time to move on." Sarah's shoulders slumped as reality hit. She walked to the door silently. The room stayed quiet until the door closed. James faced his staff, resolute. "Let this remind us what we stand for. Respect, integrity, accountability. Without those, we're not a team." Margaret saw the staff nod, unity forming. James met her eyes, and she gave a proud smile. The restaurant was nearly empty as James returned to Margaret's table. The chatter and clinking plates had given way to soft music. Margaret sat by the window, enjoying her long-awaited salmon and vegetables. James sat across from her, looking tired, but determined. "How's the food?" he asked with a small smile. Margaret set her fork down, meeting his gaze. "Wonderful," she said warmly. "But how are you holding up?" James sighed, leaning back. "Honestly, I'm exhausted. Firing someone's tough, even when it's right." Margaret nodded wisely. "It's not supposed to be easy, James. If it was, you wouldn't be doing it right." James chuckled faintly, running a hand through his hair. "I hope the team gets why I did it." Margaret sipped her water, thoughtful. "They do. I saw it in their faces. They needed to hear you stand for respect and accountability. It's not just about Sarah. It's about setting the tone." James leaned forward, arms on the table. "I hate that it came to this. I wonder if I could have handled it differently before it got this bad." Margaret touched his hand. "You can't change what's done. What matters is how you proceed. You didn't just fire her. You showed everyone this place stands for values." James nodded, his resolve firming. "I worry about the impression it left on customers who saw it." Margaret smiled gently. "Those who matter will see it as accountability. You didn't let it slide, and that shows your character and this place's integrity." They sat in quiet companionship, the evening's weight lifting. Margaret took another bite of salmon. "You know," she said with a hint of humor, "despite it all, this might be my best meal in ages." James laughed, relieved. "It better be. I told the chef it had to be perfect." Margaret chuckled, then grew serious. "You've built something remarkable, James. This restaurant reflects you. Tonight, you showed it's about serving people, not just food." James smiled slightly. "That's why I started this, to make something meaningful." Margaret's gaze was steady. "But these battles aren't over. Sarah's one person, but her attitudes are out there. Stay vigilant." James nodded, absorbing her words. "You're right. It's not just about reputation. It's about protecting our guests." Margaret's smile softened. "Exactly. It's not just about stopping bad behavior. It's about fostering good. Tonight set a standard for everyone here." James tilted his head, thoughtful. "I hope Sarah learns from it. I want her to understand why she was wrong." Margaret paused, firm but calm. "You can't control if she learns, James. You gave her the truth. The rest is hers." James nodded, confidence renewed. "You're right. I'll keep this place true to our vision." Margaret raised her glass, eyes shining with pride. "To staying true to the vision." James smiled, lifting his glass. "To the vision." They clinked glasses, the sound light and hopeful in the quiet restaurant. The night had been tough, but pivotal, a testament to standing for what's right. As Margaret enjoyed her meal, she looked around the empty dining room, pride swelling. Her son had faced a hard test and passed with integrity. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but James was ready. A month later, the restaurant thrived with its usual buzz. James had upheld the standards from the staff meeting, reinforcing a culture of respect and accountability. Margaret had visited several times, each trip a reminder of her pride in James's leadership. Tonight, she sat at her usual table, sipping tea in the warm atmosphere. James was checking the floor when he spotted a figure at the entrance. Thinking it was a new guest, he approached, then tensed. Sarah stood there, clutching a handbag, her posture stiff and uncertain. Her defensive smirk was gone. Her face was pale, eyes nervous. James approached, his face unreadable. "Sarah," he said calmly, "why are you here?" Sarah straightened, her bravado weak. I wanted to talk, if you've got a minute." James studied her, then nodded. "Let's go outside." He led her to the patio by the side entrance, away from others. The crisp air carried a faint floral scent. Sarah hesitated, wringing her hands. "Look," she began shakily, "I know I screwed up. What I did was wrong. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I'm sorry." James's gaze stayed steady. "You said that when I fired you." Sarah flinched, but continued. "I mean it now. I've been jobless since, and it's been tough. I've thought about what happened, and I know I was out of line. I let my frustrations take over and said things I shouldn't have." Margaret appeared on the patio, having followed quietly. Her voice was calm but curious. "Sarah, if you've thought so much about it, let me ask you something." Sarah blinked, startled. Okay." Margaret stepped closer, poised. "Why, of all people, would you say those things while working for a black man? Did you think James wouldn't care? That it didn't matter?" Sarah's face reddened, and she looked down. "I didn't think of it like that. It wasn't about him." Margaret's gaze was unyielding. "Then what was it about? Me? People like me? What made you think it was okay to treat me, or anyone, that way?" Sarah's voice broke under Margaret's questions. "I don't know. I was frustrated. And I didn't mean—" Margaret's tone sharpened, still calm. "Frustration doesn't make you racist, Sarah. It just reveals what's already there." Sarah swallowed, hands shaking. "I grew up around people who thought that way, okay? It's not an excuse, but it's how I was raised. I haven't really unlearned it." Margaret's expression softened slightly but stayed firm. "Unlearning starts with admitting it, but that's not enough. You have to choose to do better every day. Tonight's a good start." Sarah nodded, her face crumpling. "I'm trying." I swear Margaret studied her, then stepped back. "Keep trying, but not here. You've burned that bridge. Rebuild it elsewhere." James spoke, his voice steady. "Sarah, my mother's right. This is about you now. Whether you learn from this is up to you." Sarah wiped her eyes, her voice shaky. "I get it. Thanks for letting me say this." Margaret nodded, her tone softer. "Good luck, Sarah. I hope you figure it out." James watched Sarah leave, her shoulders slumped. He turned to Margaret. "Thanks for stepping in. You always get to the core of things." Margaret smiled faintly. "Sometimes people need the truth. Whether they listen is their choice." James nodded. "I hope she does." Margaret looked at him with pride. If she doesn't, at least she knows someone held her accountable. That's progress.